Assalamualaikum everyone, welcome to Muslim Teens, Deen, and Everything in Between with your host Aliyah Qayyum. Today I am joined with Sister Asma. Jazakallah khair so much for joining me today.
Walaikum assalam. I'm happy to be here. Happy to meet you.
Yeah, me too. So before we get on to the interview, I'd love to know more about you. So if you could give a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, that would be great.
So I am Asma Ahmed, and I am a wife. I'm a mother of my 4-year-old daughter, almost 4-year-old daughter. And I'm a social worker by background, by training and education and background. And I'm a creative entrepreneur by excitement and passion, and that's what keeps me going. So I create planners for Muslim women, and alongside that I am also working to create a community of Muslim mothers who are into creativity and want to kind of build a cohort to share their stories and to expand their creativity, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, that's awesome. And like some people don't have that, especially when they're older. I feel like after they're out of school, it's like creativity isn't as much sparked anymore. So it's so cool that you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think creativity, it was kind of a lost part of me until I got into motherhood actually, because in school I was so busy with like the book work of it all and
Mhm.
didn't really get to explore a whole lot. But yeah, it's nice to carve out time for that, I think, as you get older.
Yeah, it makes sense. But before we get into the actual interview, I like to do like icebreaker questions with my guests. So just gonna be like super brief, like silly questions, and you can give your most present, quick answer.
Sure. Okay.
Okay,
Let's
so
see.
favorite book.
Favorite book. Jane Eyre. I really like Jane Eyre, and I got into reading classical books, and that
Mhm.
one is one that I probably want to read every year, in the fall time especially. It's like over 400 pages, but
Wow.
it's worth it. It's a great book.
Yeah, and favorite movie.
Favorite movie? Oh, let's see. Uh, I would say it's kind of a draw between Inside Out and Zootopia.
Actually, I love Zootopia.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. I can easily watch the sloth scene on repeat. It gives me a kick every time. Yeah.
It's so funny. What's something that you don't understand?
Something I don't understand. Um, Toddler tantrums at the randomest things. It's fascinating, like the kind of things that can set them off.
Yeah.
My glasses, for example, I could be wearing them or not wearing them, and either option could be wrong at any given time. So I don't understand.
Super picky.
Yeah, there could be
Yeah.
like a full blown tantrum from that.
Your favorite app.
My favorite app right now would have to be. I don't really use a whole lot of apps. Oh, that's a
It
tough
can
one.
also be a website if you have like a favorite website too.
Oh, a favorite website. Oh, I have to be honest, it's kind of generic, but Pinterest, because there's so many ideas on there,
Yeah.
and for a creative person, yeah, it's like a haven when it comes to all kinds of creative projects and
Yeah.
DIYs.
It's so like different than like your generic like Instagram and TikTok. Like, I feel like it has some more like just nice inspiring things to have. And it's like
Yeah,
curated for you too, so that's great.
yeah,
Mhm.
I know you.
Exactly. And then last one is favorite recent purchase.
Favorite recent purchase would have to be my wood burning tool. So I just got into, I think, is it called pyrography? But basically, using like this wood burner to basically just etch things into wood. And
Oh wow.
it was such an impulse buy, but I was just like, I've always seen this and it looks fun, and I just like the smell of the burning wood too. So
Yeah.
I like to just letter things on there and practice calligraphy. So yeah, that would probably be my favorite.
Yeah, I mean that's cool. I've never actually heard of wood burning before, but honestly I can see how it's like so it can become so trendy.
Yeah, for sure.
So now we're gonna get into the interview questions. So the first one is, what is the brand Momentora? Because I know you have a couple of things like with planners and things like that. So just what is the brand and what's the messaging behind Momentora too? And also what is Momentora in general?
So Momentora was born about a couple of months after my daughter was born, so in 2017. And I came up with the idea because I wanted a planner I've always used planners my whole life. Throughout school, we would get our planner in like early September, and I'd, start just decorating it. And I always had one throughout up until college. And then, you become a mother, and there's like no planner coming in the mail to help you plan all these things that you have to keep track of, right? And
Mhm.
not everyone's a paper and pen person, but I adore stationery. I almost have an obsession with pens and stationery. And so I thought, I want to create a planner that is going to help me manage my just day-to-day life, but also things that I want to do, such as goals and visions, and keep track of books and ideas, and have a place that's like a special area for me to jot all that down. And so Momentor really specializes in creating those planners that are a minimalistic. It's a minimal planner that has a combination of both the Deen aspect. So there's things like a Quran reading tracker, Salah tracking, also alongside like goal setting and affirmations and habit tracking. So it's a combination of those sides of ourselves, and it's something that you wouldn't find in like a Staples, or in
Mhm.
an indigo aisle or something like that. They have gorgeous planners, but they don't necessarily address the Muslim lifestyle, especially for
Right.
Muslim women. So that was my approach when I was thinking about Momentra, is to serve that community of Muslim mothers and also Muslim women all over who wanted that intersection between their deen and their goal setting. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, and I quickly found out that I wasn't just addressing mothers. Originally, I thought I was going to mostly, offer this product to mothers, but it turned out that there were older women, there were students, and people from all areas that were interested in having a product like this. So
Yeah, I mean, I can see that it being like useful for everyone because it has the dean and it has like the planner self incorporated. But I think even in general, like if you look at the planners at Indigo and things like that, they generally have either journaling or planning. Like there's not really like an in between. And I feel like you also have that kind of mix with vision boards and goals and things like that. So it's like it's all in one place pretty much.
yeah, exactly. Alhamdulillah. And that's where I bring in some of the workshops, and I have a hard time just like sticking to one thing. That's why I kind of run a couple of things, because I have various interests. And when I get kind of jaded or bored with one side of it, I focus on another side or a different medium. So we'll get into that, I guess.
Right, yeah. And before Momentora, you were a clinical social worker. Why did you decide to pursue that career path initially and go to school for that career path?
Yeah, so that goes back to I have this flashback of when I was 18, and I kind of knew immediately that I wanted to go into either psychology or social work. I looked at psychology and I found that the route to actually getting to work with clients was going to take a much longer process,
Mm,
whereas social workers were able to get into internships much faster and actually start making those connections with communities who are in need of services. So that really clicked for me. I had phenomenal counselors growing up who helped me through a lot of challenges as I was, going through high school and middle school. So that inspired me as well. People who stood out to me and inspired me. Um, and I just knew very early on that that's what I wanted to do. And when I started the social work program, that further reconfirmed that, because I loved it, and it just clicked for me, and it told me that this is something I can see myself doing. I had a huge passion for it, still do. So clinical social work really allowed me to work with people in a way that helped them, but was also based on research and was based on clinical skills, and also working in the community. So I wasn't just working with people in like an office setting, but also going out into the community where really the challenges were very apparent, in high risk neighborhoods or high risk school districts and things like that. So I it really just was a first love for me, is to just connect with social work back, I guess, when I was in my 20s, early 20s.
yeah, yeah, it's awesome. And like it's a direct thing too, right? So you got to help people directly and especially where they were most in need. But are you still a clinical social worker or is that something that you've left as a career path right now?
So right now I am registered here in Ontario. I have chosen not to work actively in the field right now because I want to kind of pursue the creative entrepreneurship side of things.
Hmm.
Clinical social work is very demanding. I've had friends come up and ask, hey, I'm considering going into social work. And my first response to them is it's not for everyone. That doesn't mean it's not for you. It's just not for everyone because you really need to know what you're getting into. Especially with the kinds of sensitive topics and sensitive challenges that can come up, just a range of things that you have to deal with at like a crisis level when it comes to people and who, working in different settings and providing those services. I worked with everything from children who needed autism services for their autism to people who are in domestic violence relationships, to trauma and needing to call services for people who'd been in abusive situations, like right in front of me. So there's a lot that you can be thrown into very quickly, and it takes a great deal of really good mentors and supervisors to support you through that. I've also worked in nursing homes. I've worked in schools, and courtrooms. So there's just so many different
Wow.
pieces that can come at you very quickly, depending on what area of social work you go into. So I didn't leave it per se, but because motherhood is my priority right now and building my family and focusing here, I didn't feel like it was something that I wanted to really add on to my plate at this time. Of course, it's something I can do anytime in the future. But alhamdulillah, I'm really happy with the medium right now because I'm opening some doors to incorporate my social work background even into the planner, even into more like those reflection pieces that are part of Momentora and like self awareness and self development. But it doesn't look like the clinical work that I was doing in the field some years ago. So.
And I think people like underestimate how much we change. It's like people think that once you get a degree in something, that's what you're going to have for the rest of your life. But really, like you can go from the complete opposite of like what you were doing before. And it's crazy how you're able to do that. And there's a flexibility to have that too.
Yeah, the flexibility is amazing, and that's I think my middle name is I just love flexibility in everything because even with social work, I had a hard time, I would have a hard time adjusting to a role that was really kind of the same thing day after day. Like my sister is a dental hygienist, and I think I could never do that because it's the same thing. It's
Right.
very methodical. You do the same thing every day. I, on the other hand, love versatility. I love novelty. I like things that are messy and trying to figure out a problem, especially people problems, and
Yeah.
figuring that out. And so every day when I would walk into the school, I was just hit with a whole new range of challenges. And it was exciting for me to walk with people and help them navigate their own life and help them in the ways that I could. um, and it wasn't the same thing every day. And so that's not to say other fields are boring or anything, but for me, I needed that novelty. And Momentora, actually, I've created a system where I get enough of that novelty. There's so many different pieces of it that I feel fulfilled in that way, and I don't have to. Alhamdulillah, I don't have to be doing work that could really be draining right now while I'm raising a young daughter and
Mhm.
doing all the things that are involved in motherhood and raising a family. So.
Yeah, mashallah, that's awesome. And the next question is, what product did you start off with for the Momentura brand, and what is your long-term goal? Like, what do you think Momentura is going to look like in a few years from now?
So, okay, so what did I start out with? So, the first product I started out with was this planner. I still get asked about it. This was the first original planner. They sold out within 8 months of my first batch, and so I still get really happy every time I look at it. I keep it up on my little shelf and stuff, and it was such a blessing and a gift to be able to do this and bring it to life. And I think so. That was my first one, and then I have my second batch that was that were the undated planners, and that's the one I currently use. So these come
It's
in
so
blue and
beautiful,
pink.
yeah.
And so thank you. And then I think in the next 10 years, my goodness, I don't see planners being the end goal of Momentora. I think that was what initially started it. But I think where I see it going is for me to create more of like a community, a quieter community. I am an introvert, so I like quiet spaces, and I really feel like sometimes Instagram and these places can feel really overstimulating and sometimes not even as helpful as we want them to be to cultivate creativity. So I want Momentora to grow more into a cohort of women who are there to lift each other up and support each other, not necessarily to start their own businesses or side hustles, but and if that comes out of it, great, but more to support each other in their writing and their ideas and their creativity in their deen and their motherhood. So I want to kind of make that space available to women who are searching for it, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, that's so important. Like you even mentioned Instagram, I feel like sometimes that doesn't feel like as much of a community sometimes, like depending on depending on where you are, obviously, but like it sometimes it just doesn't feel like a community because how many people it has become. But when you have that more smaller, like tight knit community, like it feels better to have that, and you feel more comfortable to open up and do things, like do more things, pretty much.
Absolutely. And I myself, I noticed that when I'm in a membership kind of a group setting, I'm much more comfortable, building that trust with people, sharing something, especially if it's something that's new or I'm not really sure about it.
Mhm.
And even if I might not know these people directly, but that just the fact that we're in a smaller group makes it more comfortable. And that's what I hope to develop as well, inshallah, with Momentra and with Instagram on the rise. And they're really kind of trying to push out the smaller squares, and they want people to do more of the videos and the reels, and that's really draining on time and just commitment and energy, and for someone who is more of an introvert, it's really draining overall. So
Mhm.
I find that I think I'm just trying to wean off of that space and create something else, inshallah. So
Sure, yeah, that's awesome. And I assume that you have a manufacturer when it comes to creating your planners. How do you find the right manufacturers or even just the right people to help you build this planner and build the product?
So that I feel like honestly it was du'as, because for someone who was doing this for the first time, I was myself, I was shocked at how seamless it was for me, alhamdulillah. Like I'm really good at doing research. That was one thing I learned from school that really stuck with me, is how to create a spreadsheet, how to do your research, how to look for the right things, and just being savvy with that. But also contacts and talking to people who are kind of in a similar in a similar field, building those connections outside of just the work, but just building those relationships was really helpful. And then just doing like straight research for like 3 months, vetting people, kind of making a top list, making that first initial contact, and then finally, with a lot of istikhara and a lot of dua, to just go for it, and ask for samples and ask for changes or feedback, and then making that decision really is how it worked out for me. But alhamdulillah, if it wasn't for like a lot of duas, I'm not sure any of this would have worked out, because when I look back, I'm like, how did I even do that? Like I'm
Yeah.
surprised. Like my daughter was like 3 months old. Like I had tremendous support from my husband, alhamdulillah, and that was a huge part of it. But just to be able to condense that much work in the amount of time that I had,
Mhm.
uh, it's still something that I wholly attribute to Allah.
Yeah, like having no experience trying to find a manufacturer, I'm sure was like not even like you would assume it's difficult, but like the fact, mashallah, you had no experience with that, and with dua, like you were able to just do that. Like it's amazing, honestly.
Yeah, and mashallah, now I see a lot more women coming out with products and stuff. So the approach and the research is really getting out there,
Mhm.
and I think it'll get easier over time, inshallah. And it's just anything is difficult in the beginning, but once you kind of just dip your feet in, you kind of get a lay of the land, and you see how to what to look for and what not what I guess is not going to be helpful, then it does sort of get easier along with the process.
And does a planner look what the planner looks like now? Is that what you visualized initially when you didn't have anything and you were just kind of on the drawing board and sketching and seeing what it would look like?
I knew that I wanted something minimal, because if something because it was just a beginning product. I didn't want something that really had too much going on, because then it becomes a very very niche product, and not
Mhm.
everyone relates to that design, design or that kind of thing. But I did want it to be very neutral, like kind of neutral but feminine, and have that kind of lighter touch. But then I did shift my perspective. With my second batch, I really wanted it to be even more minimal. And the reason I did that was because I did have some even men reach out and say, could we use this as well? And is there like a neutral version? So I made one that was like a blue cover and much more neutral. And women order that, men ordered that as well. And the insides are the same. So initially, I think I didn't think too much about the cover, like the actual look of it. But all I knew was I just had these ideas in my mind of just something more neutral and feminine and minimal.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy how like you were so much expecting your target market to be women and like mothers, but it like this complete opposite people who are doing that, students, men, like you just the opposite of what you were visualizing, they were coming to your product, mashallah.
Yeah, subhanAllah, and this goes for anyone really, is that sometimes you go in with this expectation of what you're making. And I even thought, oh, this would be perfect for my like college friends. And very few of those people ordered it. That it wasn't really their market. It was interesting because my market was very different from what I expected it to be. So I had to pivot and really adjust my messaging and kind of adjust my approach. But right now I still feel this pull to kind of go back to like the motherhood side of things. So we'll see. Maybe but even though I'm starting this motherhood group, it's funny, I'm getting messages saying, hey, is this only for mothers? Can we also get in, or can we do, can we also be a part of it if we're not? And now I'm like, maybe should I open it up, make it wider? I don't know yet, so
Mhm.
still thinking that through.
Yeah, it's definitely something, it's like a process that you learn along the way. But the next one is Momentra, like you mentioned, had started doing webinars. How do you know which topic is the best that suits with your brand and you're not going to like off, off your brand and not relating to it?
Yeah, that's actually been more of a challenge for me, because I do have a lot of topics that I'm personally interested in, and that might not relate to everyone who is following or following along with Momentra. But I really just think trial and error is helpful. I haven't really used some of the more research-based strategies that other people use, like putting out a survey or doing like an Instagram like poll or
Yeah.
something like that. That would be helpful. I just have a really hard time using stories. That's probably why I'm not being as effective with with that kind of content.
Mhm.
But I find that I put them out there and I kind of see and gauge where the interest is based on like how many purchases there are, obviously, or what's converting into actual feedback from people. So it's really in the beginning phases. So my hope is to kind of put out a range of topics and kind of see what sticks,
Right.
and maybe build on those topics later on, inshallah.
Inshallah,
Yeah.
yeah. And speaking of webinars, like you recently started Refresh, and so before we get into that, like what is Refresh? Because that's actually recently something that you launched.
Yeah, so this is actually still in the, I would say, beta phases, but it literally came about just a couple of weeks ago, maybe, and it's basically the cohort idea that I was mentioning, where I'm trying to build more of a community of mothers, creative mothers, Muslim mothers who want to cultivate not just their planning side, but also their deen and their wellness. As well as their creativity. So whether that's writing or just creating art or reigniting that spark within themselves to feel inspired again. So there's a few different components of it, where there's certain deliverables that Refresh will offer, including the community. There's a podcast element of it, which practically are like mini voice notes that are more encouraging and kind of full of ideas and fresh perspectives. The webinars are also a part of Refresh, so members would have access to those things, as well as Quran journaling guides, where there's going to be reflection questions for certain surahs that are specific to mothers, because sometimes during motherhood it can be hard to like sit down and
Mhm.
really absorb more of the Quran like we used to, but we have to make time for it either way, because it really does um, help us in our day-to-day mothering. So the Quran journaling helps to cultivate the deen aspect. I also have a part of it that's focused on helping women write more and journal more. That's something I do on a daily basis. I can't really go a day without journaling. And that's not to say planning is different for me than journaling, because journaling is what helps me to write my stories and kind of get like my experiences and thoughts and feelings out on paper. And sometimes when we're not doing that, there's just a lot inside of us. And I want women to really build that skill up as well, to
Mhm.
write their stories. So reflection is a part of it. So there's a few different elements that are going to be offered for the refresh members, inshallah, focused on those key pieces of motherhood, deen, and creativity, inshallah. So that's the idea kind of behind it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds so cool. And like, I'm sure like there was so much planning that went into it. So just what are a few things that you had to do and that goes into planning a webinar as big as not even a webinar, I wouldn't call it a webinar, but more of like a community like this. Like what type of planning do go into that?
So ideally, I wanted to create something that was inclusive and also offered different ways to basically not, because for example, not everyone is able to be part of like like a Facebook group, or not everyone is able to join an email list and kind of follow along with everything. But I wanted something to be exclusive and accessible to mothers who are in that creative space, so they can go onto it and access it when they need to. And oh, sorry, your question was more about the planning. So
Yeah.
I would say that it really goes back to the journal that I always keep with me. And this is a space where I do what's called morning pages, and I write like freehand, just whatever's on my mind, or either early in the morning or at nighttime. And so I've been doing this practice for some months now. And as soon as I just kind of get everything on paper, I start to see ideas unfolding as to what's going to kind of come up for me in the future. And I'm not 100% sure about it, but I just kind of go with that intuition. And then all of a sudden, like after several pages of just writing and writing and saying, I don't know what I'm doing and I can't figure this out, and all this like self critical stuff,
Mm,
then like I notice a few pages go by, and that's when the maps start coming about, and my pages look very different, because then the ideas are actually growing, and they're, turning into roots and branches, and there's like all these like leaves coming about, and then it's like unstoppable. And so when I get to that point, which is exactly what happened with Momentora in 2017, I would just journal and kind of talk about my day, and then I got to the idea. And the same thing happened with refresh, is that okay, I have this thing, I'm kind of, I like the planners, but I want to do something else, I'm not sure what it is. So I just journaled and journaled until I got to the part where I was just excited, and this idea was like, you know what, let's try to kind of bring in some people who want to do the work, and not just, scrolling and saving posts, or like, yeah, I'll do that at a later time, but really holding each other accountable, and encouraging each other and lifting each other up to do the work when it comes to bringing our ideas to life, or writing our story, and really reflecting on the Quran and all the things that really create like a wholesome experience as mothers.
yeah. And one last question is if you could give any piece of advice to anyone that wants to start a brand that sells, products that are more like no, I wouldn't say self-care, but in a way just like to improve yourself and self-improvement and also include, webinars and include programs that you have, like what would you tell them to pretty much have a self-wellness brand?
My advice would be there can be so much. Take long walks. Is my first advice. Take really long walks,
Yeah.
because when you're moving, and some people are really into working out. That won't be me, but I'm more into the long walks. I do love, just going around the block as far as I can. But when you're walking or doing any kind of movement, it really helps with bringing fresh ideas and perspectives, and really not and being okay with just being bored, for example, because that's when your mind can start to conjure up ideas of what you hope to create or do. And then also keeping a journal, I think, is really important and helpful. So whenever I get even the slightest bit of an idea for like a little essay or a story, or something that I want to add to this refresh, back end library, I write it down. So I have a journal wherever I go, so that I don't lose that. And even on my phone, like there's like the notes app or something. So not allowing your inspiration to flee from you. So whenever it comes, just capture it, put it in a little bottle, because you don't know when you'll be able um, to really expand on it, inshallah. So
Mhm.
keep it with you for sure.
Yeah, that sounds great advice because I feel like I've found so many times where I just, I'm like using maybe like my phone or something and I had an idea, but I didn't write it down. So it went ahead of me and it's like I just didn't, I don't remember it anymore. So it's like, it's sometimes frustrating, but keeping that down and journaling it down is probably super helpful.
Yeah, yeah, and my last, and so the journal, and I would also add that if you are growing, and this is something I'm advising myself to do, so I hope this helps anybody else, is that if you find yourself growing, don't be afraid to ask for help or to bring on someone as an assistant or something like that. That has been a major struggle for me.
Mhm.
So I think that it's easier to grow faster and to grow more organically, but also just grow with a larger community if you get some help at the right time. So,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's great advice. I feel people like get scared for asking for help, but really it's you are sometimes stopping your growth if you don't
yeah,
ask for help. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, jazakallah so much, Sister Asma, for joining me today. I learned just so much about just not even business, but in just in general, how to improve yourself and how to make sure that we do better when it comes to our ideas and how to capture those ideas. So jazakallah so much for joining me today.
Oh, yeah, come. Thank you so much. I think you're just phenomenal, and I'm so excited to see where you're gonna go and where your ideas are gonna take you, inshallah. I hope that the Sunnah Camp group, inshallah, benefits from this, and this was just really fun for me because I very rarely get to talk about my stuff aside from just like the me that's in my head. So it was really nice to just talk to another person
Yeah,
about it,
well,
and thank you
yeah.
for sharing that.
No, thank you. And I'm glad I could be that person for you. But jazakallah so much for watching. Those of you at home, like I'm sure you learned so much from this, and let us know by commenting down below. Sister Asma, where can everyone find you?
So right now it's mostly my Instagram page, which is Momentora, and that's where I'm at. So
Yeah.
inshallah,
Yeah,
it's
and
a camp.
we'll leave the links down below along with SunnahCamp's links. Jazakallah again, and inshallah we'll see you all next week. Assalamu alaikum.